I'm really excited to talk about this journey. It's been kind of an interesting ride for us. And I want to make sure that even though I'm up here all alone, I want you to recognize that there's a whole team behind this project. And I always want to give props to them because they make my life easier and have really contributed to making this a success it is. So the journey begins. It began in December 2014 when we launched a new brand identity. There's a whole binder full of brand assets and language, but really the circle mark, you can see, is our killer app. So we really want to make sure that we're using that to push our new brand forward to really get UIC the recognition that it deserves out there. After this brand launch, of course, the next thing is we want to get this into the digital space. And UIC.edu, being our enterprise level website, is where we wanted to convert that brand idea into digital. This site was created as a headless WordPress site, and we did all of the work for that with our vendor Pixo. There you go. That's a peek at UIC.edu. So as I'm sure all of you understand, that central university site is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of your brand on the web, right? Because really, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of sites out there that are in your institution, and they are all, if you're like us at that time, they're all presenting the brand in varying ways. They're on different platforms. They may or may not be using all of the brand assets that we have. So we had approached the design for UIC.edu from the idea that this was the start of building an ecosystem for our web presence. You can see that we've really thought about what we might need to get to where we want to be on the web for our brand. So we have a brand, we have UIC.edu, so how do we build out the rest of the ecosystem? So we started by working from some proven success. Back in 2012, there was an existing WordPress multi-site that our central IT unit had made available to units on campus to create simple sites, right? There wasn't any specific theme attached to that. Units could request themes or go find their own themes and sort of just build whatever they wanted with that. My office had sort of inherited some websites on a previous attempt at centralizing our websites on a CMS that had failed. The staff that had supported that were gone, and we needed to help a couple of small sites that didn't have the resources to move into another platform to be able to get into a space where they could take advantage of our new brand. So I pitched the idea to create a branded theme for this existing open multi-site and explain that the cost that we had for these two sites would actually be spread out because others would see this and then get on board and be able to use that. And it was true. We had a lot of small sites who had no other resources. So they started building, and we had at least 150 small sites that made use of that theme. Now, it was not something that was fully under our control. The theme was, at that time, it wasn't responsive. It was very open for the users to be able to sort of manipulate things in ways that we weren't really happy with. And it was still in sort of some of the old brands. So once we launched the new brand, launched UIC.edu, we created the idea for Red, a new WordPress multi-site that would replace this older publish.uic.edu and really represent the brand and provide that space for small units to get online. We were so excited about the idea that we presented at the first WPCampus in 2016. So our idea was we were going to build this platform fresh from the ground up, make sure it was expandable and flexible, add as many controls as we could for brand, responsiveness, usability, and accessibility. Build it and hopefully they will come. So let me walk you through what we've built. Again, we went to our favorite platform, WordPress, and we have our WordPress database. We have Pattern Lab as the beginning for our styling. We're using Timber to separate logic from presentation. Stylus is our CSS preprocessor, and Twig is our template engine for the PHP. There's a little bit of Gulp in there to bundle the assets generated from Stylus and Twig for the front end. And we also have Gulp Watcher, where the pages are refreshed automatically anytime a change is made to the front end. All of that creates the theme PHP, which then gets sent as HTML to the user. So that's where we were when we started. We also had a build pipeline. Started out with our repository being in Bitbucket. When developers wanted to work on the code, each of the developers would pull to Vagrant, which is what they were using for their local instance. Then they would take all of their individual branches and merge them into the master branch. We would push that through Jenkins to our servers where we had chef recipes that were set up to deploy them. Now, what we built for the content creators is fixed yet flexible. So, for example, in our header space, we do have some consistent use of navigation. And in the footer, there's a standard footer at the bottom, and then there's flexibility for individual sites to add their own menus and links. We also had style options, headers and footers. So we have sort of a large hero image, our header A, or you could go with a smaller one, header B, and we have some different ways to deal with the logo and type treatment. You can have a mega footer, but if you're a small unit and you don't have need for that, you can also have the simple footer. And there were color options based on our color palettes. This is sort of our default blue and navy. We have navy and red, green and blue, and red and purple. We also have flexible pages that people can build. So there are different page templates, section landing pages, default pages, news, events, directory, contact, and then we have some specialty pages. So our home page is a unique page, unlike the other pages, and if you want to have a splash page that would overtake the home page, you can do that as well. And then here's a basic sort of internal page template to start with. You have some intro text space that you can have, and then what we have done is create all of our content is in components, or think Gutenberg blocks, which didn't exist yet. So you can pick and choose what components you want to use and organize them how you want. Somebody else might want to do something completely different. So different kind of content blocks that can be moved around and used as you want. So we have some structured page creation. So you're not going to get that usual blank WordPress page. You're going to get something that looks like this, where we have some different functions that you can have towards the top of the page, towards the bottom of the page, and then in this main area you have components. So when you click the add a component, you're going to get a list of all the different components that you can choose. You bring that into the page body, and then as you create those, if you want to drag and drop and change those, you can do that. We've got structured post types. So a lot of our content that is reusable is all in structured post types. So news, events, profiles, and some other specialty ones that have been requested as well. This is what an example is of a news and an event. In the events, you can add some additional components. So we have gravity forms that you can add in for an RSVP. The news post also has some ability to add in components. Maybe somebody wants to add in a video or other content blocks that are available. We're also trying to support the content management for the user. I mean, WordPress is very easy for users to get into and feel comfortable creating content, but we want to guide them through standards, accessibility, make sure that they are creating content that is going to maintain that accessibility, maintain that responsiveness, and follow any other standards that we can build in. So we really provide a lot of context. So for example, in a text block, we have a lot of help text. And this help text here explains why we require a title, but then allow people to hide the title. So the title is required for the screen readers, but if you don't want it to be shown in the front end interface, you can hide that. This is an example of, I think this is a profile post. So we want to make sure that people are thinking about our UIC standard for how you set up the street address. So we can't control it, but we can remind them and hope that they'll read and follow directions. Also, when we have a more complex component, so we have this pride points, we really walk people through all of the different fields and what they are and what the recommendations are for the number of words, whether you should be using symbols or not in those, so that you can create content that will appear as you want it to. And we don't really want anyone putting in any unfiltered HTML or JavaScript. So if somebody has something that normally would be a JavaScript embed, so if you guys are using Slate for your admissions CRM, people can take a JavaScript, drop it in to have a form on their page. So instead, what we did was we built in most of the standard JavaScript into the back end, and then they can fill out the rest of the information, the variables that apply to their form here, and then they're not adding in JavaScript into our page. So build it, and hopefully they will come. So to support our interested units in their content planning for the migration, we worked with our vendor Pixo again to have a content workshop. It was 2 days where we really gave people a lot of information about how they can think about their content before they're moving in, so that they're not just taking content that's maybe been on their site for years, and really making sure that they've cleaned up what they've got, they've structured it, and really refined it to be what they want it to be. And then we wanted to start with an easy win. So we had our Office of Advancement wanted to get a website up for Giving Tuesday. So this beautiful 5-page website was our first site that went live on Red. And it was really great because working with some previous WordPress champions, our advancement office, they had been one of the sites that we had brought into the original WordPress space, one of the people that we built that original theme for. So they trusted us, and they were willing to work with us when Red was still just mostly an idea with a little bit of functionality. And then we also wanted to find more allies. So our College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs, we call them CUPPA, they were still managing their content in a static website with Dreamweaver, and so they were eager to come into the new platform. So I worked with their communications person to bring all of their content owners together and really talk about their site architecture, their content planning, and really tried to help them plan and prepare for this migration. So giving that extra help really created allies there in that unit. And then came difficult conversations. So in February of 2017, I had to present to the Dean's Council and say, here's this thing that we've built. It's kind of small now, but we have big ideas. We wanted to make sure that they understood what the plan was, what the capabilities were in that moment, and what we were planning to do with development. And the Dean of CUPPA, who we'd been helping, gave a ringing endorsement, really talked up the platform and how pleased they were with what it was providing for them. But knowing deans, this didn't really sway anybody from, but I already have my own thing. I can already control it. I don't mind paying for it because this is mine. So we really started talking about money. We in Illinois were in the middle of 2 years without an approved state budget. So I started to question all of the deans, why would we have each dean pay big chunks of money to go and create something, and then somebody else go and create mostly the same thing with just a little bit of specialization, and then again and again and again. What we said was, come into our platform. If you want to invest in it, you can invest a small amount that benefits everyone, and if we're all doing that together, then we can all build something without redundancy of costs. And that really did get the provost's attention, because money talks. So while the provost was mulling all of this over, our first college site, Kappa, launched. We're all really happy to see that, because then we had something that was a larger site compared to a lot of the small units that had been in there. And May 2017, the provost sent out a memo talking about the project and said, let's all migrate. And it became official. Suddenly, we were an enterprise CMS. Let me tell you, with great power comes great responsibility. We had a lot of work that we needed to do at this point. So first, we went back to a web advisory committee that we had worked with for our uic.edu redesign project, and we wanted to, refresh the membership there, bring them back together. And this was not intended to be decision by committee, but informed decision making. So getting them involved, getting their feedback, hearing what their needs and requirements were so that we could make the right decisions for how the platform moved forward. Then we had some surveys and surveys out to all of the members of the Web Advisory Committee to understand what all of their individual unit needs might be, what kinds of requirements they would have to be able to go from the platform they were in to the WordPress multi-site. And we defined the scope of what our first phase might be, who would be involved in that, what did we consider to be in-scope sites, and we decided on basically we were looking at our colleges and our vice chancellor units, their #1 top level site, and then whatever they considered to be their second tier site. So they would define those second tier for us and give us a list of the URLs that they would consider to be in scope. And then our provost came to an advisory meeting so that she could hear feedback about the obstacles that people were expecting, what their needs were, and talk about what kind of timeline this would take to move all of these sites into this platform that needed a lot of growth behind it to really meet their needs. But the deadline was set, phase 1, July 1, 2019. And one of the benefits of all of that support from leadership, we got a project manager. Oh, I was so happy. So communication is key when you have to suddenly take on this project with all of these stakeholders. So our wonderful project manager set up this system of being able to indicate current status and where we were in the overall project for our executive updates, so to our key stakeholders. We held monthly meetings with the Web Advisory Committee, and we would give them those same sort of status updates, plus we would give them a sense of completed tasks, in progress, what bug fixes and plug updates, and what was on the horizon for what we were going to be developing. So they could see where the things that they had requested were in the development timeline. And our red website, that is our #1 communication piece. As you can see, we've set it up to let people see immediately what's going on in terms of sites that are live in development, our news. They have plenty of quick links here to know what is available, because we were rapidly adding components. What was new, what are the theme guidelines, which was a very important piece. You can see that in our transition to red section, we really break down all of the information about this project. And then theme guidelines, web strategy standards, content style guide, and some other help. The theme guidelines were set in place so that we could really lay out expectations on how they were building sites for the things that we could not actually control, right? There's only so much we can control when we turn over the keys to this. And believe me, we've locked down as much as we can. But we have theme guidelines that everyone has to check off when they request a site, that they've read them and they understand them. Of course, usually they say, theme guidelines, what are those? And we also have created a space in the dashboard for all of our site admins and editors and content creators where we have some of our frequently asked questions. We post news that they need. We have some plans to maybe add some more notifications there when we have our larger deployments. We've been doing some weekly deployments that are just small updates to the site. Also, we have a graduate assistant who took on the task of scheduling and conducting one-on-one or group training sessions for new users. So he walks through all of the sort of specialties of our build in WordPress, and he's also translated that into an online tutorial that steps people through all the different processes. So our project plan is scope. We schedule and facilitate functionality request review meetings with all 23 in-scope units that we had identified. And from that, we compiled 200 plus functionality requests. And then grouped those requests into 44 overall request categories because a lot of them were duplicates or very similar requests. And so we said, okay, let's bring this number to a real point of what is needed. And documented this initial list of unit needs and wants. Needs were going to be the priority. Wants were going to be things that may come along but might not make it at the same timeline that all of the needs would. And we established a list of 145 URLs that are in scope for this first phase. And then it was a roadshow. Our chancellor, vice chancellors, they needed to have a presentation about this. The deans needed to know where it stood now. And then, of course, the committee had to keep communicating with them and really walk them through all of the final version of needs and wants. So about this time, there were some resources that our provost had promised to give. So she gave a little bit of investment for us to go back to our vendor Pixo and get some rapid development going while our team was getting built up. And then also gave funding for 2 new developers in our central IT group. I have 2 developers in digital communications and a content specialist. And then there were going to be dedicated developers in central IT to create this collaborative team that would keep this all going. So then we started to become agile. My cohort in central IT, want to try agile? Not knowing what it was, I said, sure. So that's when the beginning of a beautiful partnership happened. We are using Jira by Atlassian to document and track our work tasks and address all of the requirements that we have. So this is from July of 2018, when our partnership really started and we went agile, to July 2019. This tracks all of our projects that are under review, to do, in progress, and done. And this big giant area here is what we've completed in this year. My team's been busy. So now we're gaining some traction. We've got our College of Education goes live. Our College of Nursing goes live, and they made an investment in Red. They brought in a bunch of new homepage-only components to really kind of make the homepage stand out beyond the other pages that we had. But in December, we realized that it was time that we had to address some technical debt. So we needed to update our PHP, and we needed to add caching for site performance, and we needed to reconfigure our build pipeline. So I want to remind you that this was our build pipeline originally, and when we first created Red, our central IT web services unit had lost several staff members. It was very short-staffed. We did not have the ability to manage or maintain this pipeline. So the only thing that was actually managed and maintained by UIC was the servers. Everything else was still with our vendor. Now that we have new staff in place, it was time to create our own continuous integration to allow us to have our multiple developers work in parallel using Git flow methodologies and providing checks on the code integrity deployed to the servers ourselves, right? So we needed to minimize communication gaps, a lack of transparency, and maintain better control of competing agendas. With the build pipeline not having been in our control, there were situations where we really had some struggles because we didn't have a support contract at that time, and if something went wrong, we had to, work with the vendor to quickly try to address that without having a support contract in place. It's a challenge. We don't expect them to do work without being paid, but we didn't have any control of this environment. So that had to change. Now, it was a really great learning experience because they had brought in modern development practices to UIC that hadn't existed there before. So this was, it was a great opportunity to work from this and then to learn how we needed to transition this to ourselves. So here's our new Git flow build pipeline. Our code base is in GitLab. We have a development branch, and individual developers will pull a feature branch into their local instance, which is now on Docker. And after they've done their work, they merge back to the development branch. And then once all of the work that is ready for the next build is set, that gets brought into our deploy pre-approved branch where we have some code review. Then all of that goes into the master branch and to Jenkins. And Jenkins runs a lot of, I think it's 35 tests. So a lot of code coverage there to make sure that we aren't going to be pushing any bad code into the live environment. So if we get a red light, the build stops. And we'll get a report from Jenkins telling us what was the problem. But if we get a green light, everything moves on. And that code coverage was very important for us. We had a problem in the previous pipeline, and we didn't know what to do. There was like an hour gap where we had people scrambling around to figure out how to restore the platform back to where it was. Now, in this pipeline, earlier this year, we had a problem where Jenkins stopped the build. It didn't affect the production environment. It did what we needed it to do, protected us from sending bad code through. Turned out it was just one bracket out of place, but that's why we have this, because those kinds of things can slip through, right? So at this point, we're really starting to realize the benefits of a single platform at UIC. One thing that we built into this WordPress multi-site was that every single site has our central Google Analytics tracking ID code, and each individual site has the ability to add a secondary one for themselves so that they can track their own analytics. So this is the first time we've ever had a broad picture of traffic going to UIC.edu sites. Also, when we had to implement GDPR cookie banner, we implement it once on Red, and then everyone there has it immediately. Those who hadn't migrated yet had to go and figure all of that out on their own. And then emergency communications. We have a plugin that creates a notification pop-up when we use our emergency communications channels to put all of that content on every site. So we're in a space of steady growth at this point with our College of Business going online. I go back to the deans and I was showing them some of our Google Analytics, including a list of the top 10 pages in red. And let me tell you, if you're a dean who sees yours at the top, you're very happy. If you don't see yours in there, you know that you're missing out. If yours is kind of low, a little competition goes a long way. So we started to get some more sites. And then in February, we started expanding our development community. So now that we have our pipeline, we want to bring in all of the developers that are out in the colleges who've been working in their own little, silos, bring them into this process, let them be a part of this development so that they can continue to develop for their own units, but do it in a way that it benefits everyone. And again, they get to really feel like they have some ownership of this whole project. And then the looming deadline, we have a sprint to the finish line. So most of our big sites came online in June and July of this year. This is a kind of the overall picture of the timeline I just showed you from brand refresh to July phase 1 ending. And let's talk about our current status. So we have 18 of the 23 in-scope units are on red. We have one that is, they're in a holding pattern because we have a conflict with something that they need on there that we're trying to resolve so that they can go live. So they're ready, we're just, we need to finish up on our end. Some of the others have gotten some special dispensations or extended deadlines. 11 of our 15 colleges are on red. I have never seen this much consistency across our colleges ever in my nearly 20 years at UIC. So this is still very amazing to me. The asterisk is in August 16, all the paperwork will be signed and finalized for our 16th college. We are acquiring John Marshall Law School in Chicago, which will become UIC John Marshall Law School, Chicago's first and only public law school. Just got to get that picture. So right now, we have 294 sites total on this WordPress multi-site platform. And we have completed 485 issues in JIRA. And what does success look like? That's just a sample of our top level sites. You can see that we look like we belong together. We've never looked that cohesive and on brand ever. So phase 2, we just had a meeting with our web advisory committee, and we are talking about some UI, UX brainstorming. So these are just some ideas that the core team has presented, and we're going to get some feedback from the advisory committee so that we can really make a roadmap for the next 18 months. So we need to be much more focused with mobile-first design enhancements. Our brand is evolving a little bit. There's some features of the logo use that we want to keep the circle mark, but some of our vertical, sideways logo stuff is going to evolve. Identifying the next sites to migrate, surveying the new needs that folks have now that they have all of the basic building blocks and a lot of special custom functions. What do they need next? What do they see on the horizon for what they want to do with their sites? Revisit the queue that we have to make sure that we haven't kind of left anything hanging out there or lost some things in the process. And reimagining our phone book and profile posts. We found that our profile posts, we're getting more and more requests that are turning what was meant to be basic, who's in the department, where are they, how do you contact them, is becoming, oh, I want like basically a full profile of all of my work. It's sort of like they're trying to create a portfolio site with the profile posts. So we want to think about what makes sense for what content should be in the red platform and what content we should be pulling in from other tools such as symplectic elements that a lot of researchers use to have their portfolios, our own central phone book directory. We want to have canonical data in one place and bring it in to the environment instead of recreating it multiple times. So technical brainstorming, we need to refactor the code a little bit. We want to improve some of the styling, how we're doing some of the styling. We also want to refactor it so that we're prepared for cloud hosting. We've been hosting all of this, and we need to make sure that we're setting up the redundancies and the scalability that the cloud hosting would benefit. Microservices, we really need to find ways to do some better authentication. People want to have granular authentication. Right now we have more of a broad authentication for some pages. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We're looking at content as a service. Right now, everyone's news and post events are sort of, they build them in their site and then it's locked in there. So we want to look at how do we find a way to create a content hub that provides content as a service to all of the sites. And as I just mentioned, authentication and authorization. And continue building our developer community. So you can give your feedback. That's a really long URL because I had a really long title. Slides are up, and I did separate all of those nicely layered images off into separate PDFs, so you'll still be able to sort of get a sense of what was presented. And there's my contact information. So, questions? Yes.
I was curious about how your actual integration and content integration process goes. So when a college comes into your system, do you have colleges with different CMSs? Do you have to manually integrate? How are you dealing with those problems?
So a lot of their content, because we are heavily dependent on advanced custom fields, we do use WP all import for things like news posts and event posts. So if they had a lot of news posts on their site and they want to keep that archival information, we can help them to migrate that by mapping their fields to our fields and bring that in mass. And that's worked very well for a lot of units. But otherwise, we just sell it as a great opportunity to look at your content and really rethink how you're presenting it to your audiences. A lot of folks don't really do that on a regular basis, so this was a great opportunity for them to really look at their content again.
Are you thinking about Gutenberg? Or?
So, yeah, we haven't really figured out what to do about Gutenberg because we sort of built what they built. It's all these little component blocks. So I think that is a question that my development team is going to have to really tackle. What are we going to do about that? Okay. Thank you.